Hi everybody, I'm making this video for people who have wet floors in their 1980 to 1997 Ford OBS trucks. They're mostly the same from 1980 to 1997. Some differences in the firewall. I've been hunting a leak for a long time and I finally figured it out, and I'm going to show you what I found and what I had to do to find it. I'm going to start off by showing you, or just kind of explaining how these Fords work, because they can get confusing. But the firewall actually starts up here under the windshield, comes down at this angle, bends, it runs down, and it connects to the floor pan right here at this seam. And then obviously all the water that comes down off of your windshield, off your roof, runs into this gutter. And one thing that a lot of people don't understand is if you look at this seam right here as it crosses, it gets lower, it's at an angle, because Ford wanted all the water in that gutter area to drain to the driver's side. The reason they did that is because they're sucking air in and running it into the cab over on the passenger side, so they want the water to run to the driver's side. That being said, let's hop to it. My leak, and the other thing I want to point out is this right here is your hood release cable penetration, and that is a good reference point for this video, because I think all of these trucks, it comes through the firewall. So my leak right here, there's an intersection here, and they had to make a notch because the metal bends, and there's a three-way intersection right here, and this is right at your floor, right way down low where your cable comes through, and that is where I have been leaking for a long time, and I have not been able to find it. And there's also another potential leak spot right there as well, but definitely not quite like this upper one. So I cut a hole in here because all the YouTube videos that I watched show them sealing everything and all this and doing everything, but this is a cavity that you can't get to. So I sawed a hole in there. I don't think it really hurts anything. I'll paint the edges of it. The fender covers it. No problem. So I'm going to stick this in here and let you see where I'll stick my light on my headlamp on that hole and see the light coming through right there. So that's half of that hole. The other half goes into the cab, and that's where the water for me was coming. And if you see this rusty stain, it's rusty here because all the water that comes off of this truck comes right over this wall, over this edge, and runs down. And there's another three-way intersection right there where water could potentially leak in. So if you have a leak higher up, it's probably coming from right here, and then there's also a potential for a leak right there, and potential for a leak, but it gets further and further away from the main flow line, which is right here. So that's not necessarily a huge issue. Panning over to the same side, same thing. The Ford did a better job overlapping the seams up here, so it's possible to leak there, but not as highly as those spots. So we'll go up and we will look down in that hole from above so you can see what it looks like. Because without that hole, the only way you can see into that cavity is from right here. And so if you look here, so now you can see my round hole that I cut. And the main potentials for leak up here are right, this 3-inch line. Water could migrate this way and into the cab. Can't tell in the video, but this is steeper and it overlaps this way, so it's not as likely that water can get in right there. But starting here, going right to that point where there's a hard bend, definitely potential for leaks. Moving on, that's pretty much it for here. One other thing that I wanted to point out as soon as this airplane flies by is this. All right, air compressor shut off. So now we know the water comes out of the gutter through this cavity, hits here, flows down through here. I intentionally bent this up and opened this up in around 2010 when I first put this truck together, because I knew sediment would plug this corner up. Ford originally has a rubber boot here. I've seen this compartment completely full of debris, rots out the truck. This is a huge problem. But the next thing I want to point out, for if you have water getting into your cab and you're confused, so this U-shape piece of metal runs the entire length of the cab. It's one of the main structural pieces, and it runs through this other hollow cavity, which is the hole. I'm pretty sure I drilled this hole in 2010-ish. And the reason I'm going to show you is because all this water runs and it drips right here, and there's some pretty big gaps from the metal for water to puddle in here, which isn't a big deal because it's all outside, but as it fills up with dust and with dust mostly over the years, that dust acts like a sponge and it helps water leach. And I will show you on the inside of the truck here where my gutter in my floor was always wet right through this area. And the reason is because that U channel that's upside down, this is it right here. This piece comes in and seams onto it right here, and then the inside half seams onto it right here. I'm going to put my flashlight and shine it right in there, and then we'll go and look into that hole where we just were and see. Covered my, so see the light in there. So anyhow, water, when it sits in here, can leach into that gutter through right there where those seams come together. And it can do the same right there. Sorry, I know that screwdriver is really loud. So those two spots, any muck or debris that builds up in there, those are going to be your two major rust spots. And it's always going to be wet because water is always sitting here and it's a flat surface, and dust and grunge, and also this area here, the tire's always flipping mud up into this area. It's just a rough spot. Everyone knows this bolt is always difficult to get out and sometimes breaks because you got water draining here, you got tires flipping water up in this general area. It's a tough spot. So I am going to seal up those spots that I showed you, and then I think I'm going to fluid film the rest of it and call it a day. The fluid film I've got works pretty dang good, and it's in kind of a protected area, and I'll see what that does for a few years, and we'll go from there. There's people on YouTube that talk about sealing up all of this, and I don't really necessarily think that's necessary. Ford didn't seal this right here from the factory because any water that's out here and gets into there just drops into this open cavity. And I've seen people seal this gap, which, I mean, I'm in Alaska where it rains 140 inches a year for the last 5 years. That's not really particularly a problem. And any water that does run down this drips in there. If it gets into here, it's going to also go back into this cavity. But if it stays out there, runs down the inside, gets to right there, that's where it's getting into your cab. I bet 9 out of the 10 trucks that got wet floors, it's coming from right there, or that upper one that's just inside right there. But that's what I've learned. I hope that this helps y'all out. I suspect that you have been into the other side. They're similar. There's another cavity, or it might be part of this. In fact, I think it is, that it pulls the air out of the gutter in and then into the cab, and then it blows it right back out of the cab and into the HVAC box on that side of the cab. So it should be similar issues if it's leaking on your passenger side. I have not confirmed that yet, but that'll be my next go around. So this is a truck I built in 2010. The ground up, I converted it to coilover, built my own arms, put a 12 valve Cummins in it, and air ride cab. It's got 4 bags. Those are the cab shocks. You see back there, my second set of cab bags, 4 bags on the front. The cab hinges at the back. It's all big rig stuff. Those are Kenworth airbags. This is where we were at 15 years after a build. So holding up pretty good. But I was in the Southwest US where water was not an issue, and I've been in Alaska for a little over 5 years, and now water has become an issue. Because of that, a couple of things I've done that you won't see on other trucks is this is a weather stripping seal that I clipped on here, and it works really well because it does not let any water go underneath this trim. And then when that bezel's under here, forces all the water out onto that. And then this trim, which I fell off pulling the bezel out, when the hood closes, it actually seals onto that bezel, so that crack is completely sealed. These side seals actually seal on the fenders really well. They're just a little U-shaped seal. Obviously they're going to leak a little bit. And then there's all those pinholes in the screen. And one of the things I was just experimenting with to cut down on the water was some Gorilla Tape. And I put Gorilla Tape between this and the fender to close that gap, and then the hood closes this gap. And that keeps, I'd say at least 90% of the water out. Obviously, I left some spaces for some water. Water's going to get in, but overall, most of that water runs onto this, ran across my Gorilla Tape and down the side of the truck. It leaves streaks on the truck on the outside, but it's definitely better than the alternative for this particular environment. Anyhow, been a really good truck. It's holding up really well. As long as I keep whittling away on these little projects to make sure the rot doesn't get to her, she should last a long time. Another quickie, just for funsies, is I built this bed, ran the exhaust up through the headache rack, and there's a bunch of 1,000 little things I did. But anyhow, my 93 F250. Hope this helps.